Welcome to the Cluetrain. The show will be a little bit different because we're jamming. Our show today is about the Cluetrain Manifesto Revisited. My name is Mike Boyle. In our program today, we'll be revisiting the Cluetrain Manifesto. It was a book actually, that was published in 1997. And because so many of us have actually forgotten what it was like back in those days where we only had analog, that I thought it would be nice to go ahead and revisit some of those hopes that we had back in the 90s of how the internet could actually go ahead and change our world for the better. So let me start with some passages coming from the manifesto. These markets are conversations. Their members communicate in language that is natural, open, honest, direct, funny, and often shocking. Whether explaining or complaining, joking or serious, the human voice is unmistakably genuine. It can't be faked. Most corporations, on the other hand, only know how to talk in the soothing, humorless monotone of the mission statement, marketing brochure, and "Your call is important to us" busy signal. Same old tone, same old lies. No wonder network markets have no respect for companies unable or unwilling to speak as they do. Now, this was written in 1997, and I raise the question to all of you: what has changed? What were the hopes that we had? What went wrong? radio tipping point. And this has become experimentation central here. And that's exactly the spirit we had when this thing called the internet was actually unveiled on all of us, certainly those of us who were one of the early adopters, quote unquote. Of course, for those individuals who didn't have to go through the pain of having an email address and nobody to write to, which was my situation for a while. I remember the first time I saw the net, 1995. And I felt that there was a water faucet in my brain that was turned on immediately, and I just wanted, and I had all of these ideas that came out. It almost seems quaint today. So what happened? When did it actually go wrong? Let's continue with the clue train. But learning to speak in a human voice is not some trick, nor will corporations convince us that they are human with lip service about listening to customers. They will only sound human when they empower real human beings to speak on their behalf. While many such people already work for companies today, most companies ignore their ability to deliver genuine knowledge, opting instead to crank out sterile happy talk that insults the intelligence of markets literally too smart to buy in. Were we really that gullible in 1997? Are we that much better off today? However, employees are getting hyperlinked even as markets are. Companies need to listen carefully to both. Mostly they need to get out of the way so intra-worked employees can converse directly with intranet-worked markets. Going out of my way to prove this is all live. To show you how quaint some of the text was from back then. Corporate firewalls have kept smart employees in and smart markets out. It's going to cause real pain to tear those walls down, but the result will be a new kind of conversation. And it will be the most exciting conversation business has ever engaged in. That was the spirit we had. Welcome to the Cluetrain edition of Radio Tipping Point. My name is Mike Boyle. And we are revisiting the Cluetrain Manifesto. And this is a book that I devoured pretty much when it came out. And I remember a time, this was in 2000, where I was working for a large corporation. And of course, you have to remember that was the pinnacle of the .com era. And a number of the executives that they were talking about in the Cluetrain Manifesto, they were trying to show how hip they were in understanding this new phenomena. It was still relatively new. And trying to show how far ahead of the game they were. And so I went to a conference, and we had our regional president get up, and he was supposed to give us an indicator of what our e-commerce strategy was. And I thought that was quite, sounds pretty funny today, talking about an e-commerce strategy. But that was the reason why we showed up. And he mentioned at the time he was reading this book. And then he went on to talk about something that made it very clear to me that he had no clue what he was reading. One of the basic tenets of the Cluetrain Manifesto were the 95 Theses. So let me go ahead and read a few of them off to you. We'll see how that goes. Markets are conversations. Markets consist of human beings, not demographic sectors. Conversations among human beings sound human. They are conducted in a human voice. Whether delivering information, opinions, perspectives, dissenting arguments, or humorous asides, the human voice is typically open, natural, uncontrived. People recognize each other as such from the sound of this voice. The internet is enabling conversations among human beings that were simply not possible in the era of mass media. Hyperlinks subvert hierarchy. In both internet-worked markets and among intranet-worked employees, people are speaking to each other in a powerful new way. These network conversations are enabling powerful new forms of social organization and knowledge exchange to emerge. As a result, markets are getting smarter, more informed, more organized. Participation in a network market changes people fundamentally. I think this last one really is a good indicator of the hope that we had back then. So are we getting smarter? In the age of deep fakes and fake news? Of course, we all know that today is a very special day. The last date that number 45 will be sitting at 1600. There are no secrets. The networked market knows more than companies do about their own products, and whether the news is good or bad, they tell everyone. Well, that's one that clearly become very prominent over the last 23, 24 years. What's happening to markets is also happening among employees. A metaphysical construct called the company is the only thing standing between the two. Corporations do not speak in the same voice as these new networked conversations. To their intended online audience, companies sound hollow, flat, literally inhuman. In just a few more years, the current homogenized voice of business, the sound of mission statements and brochures, will seem as contrived and artificial as the language of the 18th century French court. And now that's an interesting one. And here I think there is a clear generational difference. Between mine and younger generations who by nature don't believe anything, or perhaps a little bit more crass, are naturally cautious, mistrustful. Already, companies that speak in the language of the pitch, the dog and pony show, are no longer speaking to anyone. How far did we get with that one? I personally think we have a long ways to go. Now, the dog and pony show is called greenwashing. Companies that assume online markets are the same markets that used to watch their ads on television are kidding themselves. Now that one sounds a bit dated. In the time of Netflix. And subscriptions. Companies that don't realize their markets are now networked person to person, getting smarter as a result, and deeply joined in conversation are missing their best opportunity. And this is almost a direct contradiction to the idea of the pitch. Instead of actually investing time to make sure that the message is meaningful. Companies can now communicate with their markets directly. If they blow it, it could be their last chance. Companies need to realize their markets are often laughing at them. Companies need to lighten up and take themselves less seriously. They need to get a sense of humor. We are in the 7th inning stretch. In Playground Tipping Point today, my name is Mike Boyle, and we are revisiting the Cluetrain Manifesto, and we are live. Let's continue with some of the 95 theses coming from the Cluetrain Manifesto. This was published in 1997. And the intention here is to give you some food for thought. Taking a look back to what our thoughts were back then. And you can decide for yourself what has actually changed. Learning to speak with a human voice is not a parlor trick. It can't be picked up at some Tony conference. To speak with a human voice, companies must share their concerns of their communities. But first, they must belong to a community. Human communities are based on discourse, on human speech about human concerns. The community of discourse is the market. The companies that do not belong to a community of discourse will die. Org charts worked in an older economy where plans could be fully understood from atop steep management pyramids and detailed work orders could be handed down from on high. Oh, this is a good one for 2021. Where we keep expecting answers from individuals who can't know more than what we know. So let's look at this paradigm shift. Did they know more back then? Certainly the pace of change or the pace of development was not nearly as quick as it is today. And we've had about 23, 24 years of damage that was inflicted on our environment, in our society. And that change has been exponential, meaning that it grows on each other. And we as human beings naturally struggle to keep up. Instead of actually thinking of the easier solution, and that would be to slow it down. Paranoia kills conversation. That's its point. But lack of open conversation kills companies. Smart companies will get out of the way and help the inevitable to happen sooner. If willingness to get out of the way is taken as a measure of IQ, then very few companies have yet wised up. However, subliminally at the moment, millions of people now online perceive companies as little more than quaint legal fictions that are actively preventing these conversations from intersecting. This is suicidal. Markets want to talk to companies. Sadly, the part of the company a network market wants to talk to is usually hidden behind a smokescreen of hucksterism, of language that rings false, and often is. Markets do not want to talk to flacks and hucksters. They want to participate in the conversations going on behind the corporate firewall. You're invited, but it's our world. Take your shoes off at the door. If you want to barter with us, get down off that camel. We are immune to advertising. Just forget it. If you want us to talk to you, tell us something. Make it something interesting for a change. We've got some ideas for you too. Some new tools we need, some better services, stuff we'll be willing to pay for. Got a minute? You're too busy doing business to answer our email. Oh gosh, sorry, gee, we'll come back later. Maybe. You want us to pay? We want you to pay attention. We want you to drop your trip. Come out of your neurotic self-involvement. Join the party. Don't worry, you can still make money. That is, as long as it's not the only thing on your mind. Well, that one was poignant. And we're still struggling with it. Have you noticed that in itself, money is kind of one-dimensional and boring? What else can we talk about? Your product broke? Why? We like to ask the guy who made it. Your corporate strategy makes no sense. We'd like to have a chat with your CEO. What do you mean she's not in?